Hey everyone, it's Kristen from k.becca, and this is the final video in my Silhouette print and cut tutorial series. I may add another video here and there as necessary if a topic comes up that I didn't cover in the series, or if there are updates in Silhouette Studio that change the way that print and cut works, but this is the last video that I actually have planned. In this video, I'll walk you through the actual process of printing and cutting, and along the way, I'll share some tips and pointers that will help you avoid some of the common issues that you can run into with print and cut. The file that I'm working with in this video has a bunch of the print and cut images that we've created throughout the series, and offers a great sampling of the variety of different types of images that you can use for print and cut. Okay, let's get started. I have my file set up here and have the registration marks activated. I talk more about page setup and registration mark options in the first video in the series, and a link to that should be popping up now if you want to check that out. To activate registration marks, open the Page Setup panel from the far right menu. It's the top icon that looks like a little piece of paper. Click on the far right tab in the Open panel, and choose the registration mark type for your machine from the Style dropdown. I chose Type 1 because I'm using a Silhouette Cameo machine. My first tip is to make sure that you have the correct registration mark type chosen for your machine, because it can really mess things up if you accidentally choose the wrong type. I actually ran into this just in the past year. I had a print and cut file that I was trying to cut, and the registration marks were way off. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I tried all of the normal tricks that I use when I have issues with print and cut, and nothing was working. After about a half a dozen attempts, I realized that I had accidentally chosen the wrong registration mark type when I set the file up. Once I changed it to the correct type, the file cut perfectly. Next, if you know that your printer tends to print on the light side and you're having problems with your machine registering a page for print and cut, you may want to increase either the length and/or the thickness of your registration marks. You can do this in the registration mark window in the Dimensions section. I'll just click the Restore Defaults button here since I don't have issues with the registration marks printing too light. Something else you'll want to make sure of is that the page size of your file in Silhouette Studio and the page size in your printer are the same. The standard paper size for printers here in the US is 8.5 by 11 inches, which is also known as letter size. If you're outside the US, your paper size may be different. You can change the page size of your file by clicking the left tab in the Page Setup panel and either choosing one of the sizes from the Size drop-down menu, or by setting the dimensions in the input areas below the drop-down. To check your printer settings, open the Print dialog by clicking on the printer icon from the top left menu. Then click Preferences, and every printer brand has a different setup here, but for my printer, the paper size is right there under the basic settings. It's set to letter, which is a match for my page size in Silhouette Studio. But if it wasn't, I could use the drop-down here to select from a number of different page sizes. I'm good to go, so I'll just cancel out of the print dialog windows. Next, you want to make sure that none of the print and cut images or part of an image goes into the cross-hatched areas at the top and bottom of the page. These are off-limits areas for print and cut, and if you have part of an image in this area, then you could have problems. Also, some people have problems if they put images into the white area that's in between the cross-hatched areas at the top of the page. I've never had an issue with this, so I often put images in this area for print and cut, but if you're having problems, you may want to remove any images from that area to see if it helps. You also want to make sure to keep your images inside the red border that runs around the page because they'll be cut off if they're outside that area. Now we're ready to print, so I'll open the Print dialog window from the top left menu again, and I'll click Print to print the page. I'll see you over at the machine so we can cut our print and cut page. Okay, my page has just finished printing, and you can see that the registration marks are nice and clearly printed, and everything on the page looks good. Now I'm going to place the page on my cutting mat and line the top left corner of the page up with the top left corner marks on the mat. I've read that some people's machines don't feed in as far as necessary when they load their mat, so they actually put the top left corner of the page a little outside of the marks on the mat so the registration process works. I've never run into this, but it's something to try if you're having issues. You'll also want to make sure that your page is in the correct orientation, with the square registration mark at the top left when you adhere it to the cutting mat. Otherwise, your machine will have problems registering the page. And you want to make sure that your page isn't too crooked on the mat. I'm exaggerating the crookedness here a little bit, but I have experienced problems with registration and with cut lines being way off if I accidentally place the page on the mat at a little bit of an angle. The page doesn't need to be perfectly straight to get really accurate registration, but it can't be that crooked either. A tiny bit crooked is okay, but noticeably crooked can cause problems. Alright, let's get the machine ready. A common issue that can cause problems with registration is if a piece of vinyl or cardstock or something gets caught in the housing, which is where the laser that performs the registration process is located. If something has gotten caught in that area, it can obstruct the laser and cause registration problems, so make sure it's all clear before loading the mat. Now we've got our page adhered to the cutting mat and we're ready to load it into the machine. Line the left side of the mat up with the left guide arrows here, and then press the load button on your machine to load the page. I always close the cover on my machine during the registration process, which goes against a lot of the information out there that talks about having enough light on your machine for the registration process. Many people place their machine near a window or even place it right under a lamp to get enough light into the machine that the laser is able to register the cut lines properly. However, a while back I was having problems with my machine not being able to register pages for print and cut, and what resolved it for me was actually closing the cover and allowing less light into the machine. It could have been that things were too bright and heavy shadows were being cast into the machine, which can also cause problems. I'm still not sure, but I do know that keeping the cover closed during the registration process resolved the issues that I was having, so now I'm in the habit of always closing it during the registration process. Okay, now I'm going to head back over to Silhouette Studio to send the page to cut. Okay, I'm back in Silhouette Studio, and I'll just click the Send tab from the top right menu, and then I'll change the cut settings to the settings that work for the cardstock that I'm using. After that, I'll click the Send button to send the file to my machine to cut. Back over at the machine, the registration process is happening. During a successful registration, the mat will be run through the machine so the bottom registration mark can be read. Then the mat will return back through the machine, and the top registration marks will be read. When this is finished, your machine will adjust the auto blade, if that's the type of blade that you're using, and it'll adjust it to the correct depth, and the cutting process will begin. Once the cutting has started, I'll open up the lid on the machine so you can see what's going on, and I'll speed things up and add a little music while everything is cutting. When the screen on the Cameo says Job Complete, I'll press the Unload button to unload the mat, and you can see how well all of the print and cut images cut. Now I have a bunch of elements that I can use to make handmade cards, or for scrapbook pages, pocket letters, and other paper craft projects. With print and cut, there are just so many possibilities, which is why I love it so much. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about different papers and materials that can possibly cause issues with print and cut. I've talked about glossy sticker papers and other glossy surfaces causing registration issues in some of my earlier videos on print and cut hot foiling. Silhouette also has printable metallic silver, gold, and rose gold sticker papers that can cause issues with registration. In addition to glossy surfaces, papers that are too dark won't register properly for print and cut. So for example, a dark brown or black cardstock won't work. However, there are ways to get these types of papers and surfaces to register and cut perfectly. The method that I had been using was to set up a file in Silhouette Studio with just registration marks and print it. Then I'd cut out the registration marks from the page and line them up as closely as I could over the marks on the printed piece of sticker paper or whatever glossy or metallic surface that I was using. But after those videos, several of you gave me some great tips on making this process easier, and one of them was to take white, matte address labels or sticker paper and cut squares of it and stick them onto the page before printing. I'm going to try this right now with a piece of the Silhouette Clear Glossy Sticker Paper. I have a piece of matte white sticker paper here, and I'll just cut out some pieces and stick those over the top 2 corners and bottom left corner of the page where the registration marks will print. Then I'll put the page into my printer and print the same file that we've been using throughout the video. After I printed the page, I saw that I goofed a little bit and cut one of the pieces of the matte sticker paper a little bit too small, so the registration mark is on the glossy sticker paper a little bit. I'm just going to go with it and hope that it will still register correctly. I'll go through the same process here as I did earlier for the print and cut cardstock page. I won't make you sit through the whole process again, so we'll just jump ahead, and thankfully the page registered correctly and cut perfectly. No problem caused by the little piece of registration mark that was on the glossy paper. Thank you so much to all of you who shared the tip about using the matte label paper on glossy and metallic surfaces. This is definitely a less fussy method than the one that I was using before, and I'll be using the matte label paper method going forward. Before I go, I want to talk about some of the things that you can try if you've done everything right, double-checked your settings, followed all the tips for getting great print and cut results, but you're still having problems. First, if your machine still won't register your print and cut pages either properly or at all, even after you've checked settings and all of that, try turning off your machine and closing out of Silhouette Studio on your computer. Wait for a few minutes and then turn your machine back on and open Silhouette Studio again. This almost always works for me to resolve the issue when my machine just won't register a page. A few times though, this hasn't done the job. If this is the case for you, try turning everything off. Turn off your machine, close out of Silhouette Studio, and turn your computer off completely. Leave everything off for a few minutes, and then turn everything back on and try again. For the times where turning off just the machine and closing out of Silhouette Studio haven't worked to resolve the issues for me, turning off everything and then turning it back on and trying again almost always has. If you've tried both of these approaches and neither has worked, then be sure to make sure that your Silhouette Studio is up to date. Updating your software to the latest stable release can do the trick sometimes in resolving issues with print and cut. Another thing you can try, and this is a more advanced option, is to change the packet size settings in your Silhouette Studio software. To do this, first go up to the top left menu, click Edit, then click Preferences from the dropdown. In the window that opens, click the Advanced tab, and the packet size section should be right in the middle of the window. Packet size is the rate that data is sent to your machine. The default packet size is 1000, but sometimes this can be too high. If you're noticing that your machine is saying that projects are complete when they're not completely cut, or your machine is missing pieces of designs when it cuts, or you're getting the dreaded cut line across the whole page because the blade isn't lifting enough when the carriage returns, then changing the packet size could be the answer. Lowering the packet size to 500 will send data to your machine at a slower rate, meaning that your machine gets more breathing room to do its job. I like to think of it as being like I am when I'm trying to think of too many things at once. When too many thoughts are running through my head at the same time and it's stressing me out, I start to make mistakes. Like for example, I'll go down to the kitchen for a snack, and when I'm done, I'll put my empty plate in the refrigerator instead of in the sink. Or I'll try to put the package of cheese in the cupboard instead of back in the fridge where it belongs. In those situations, I need to take a breather so I can think clearly again and stop making those types of mistakes. Finally, if none of these things has worked to resolve the issues that you're having, you may need to recalibrate your machine. I've personally never had to do this, but Silhouette America has a whole page on their site that will walk you through the process. I'll link to that in the description area below in case you need it. I hope that you found this video to be helpful, and I hope that the whole Silhouette print and cut tutorial series has been helpful for you. If you liked this video, it would be great if you would give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune in again soon.